begin tonight with the expiry of the last nuclear weapons control treaty between the US and Russia. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, known as New START, was signed in 2010 and was one of a handful of agreements designed to help prevent a catastrophic nuclear war. The treaty's expiry effectively marks an end to the arms control cooperation between Washington and Moscow that helped bring an end to the Cold War. The UN Secretary General has warned of a grave moment for international peace and security. Antonio Guterres urged Washington and Moscow to negotiate a new deal, saying the risk from nuclear weapons was the highest in decades. The New START treaty limited each side to around 1,500 long-range warheads. Russia has said it assumes neither side is bound by the terms any longer, but said it intends to act responsibly. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. So the New START treaty that capped and reduced America and Russia's massive long-range nuclear arsenals created a new form of verification that allowed each side to directly verify nuclear warheads numbers and reduce the two countries' arsenals by about 25% from previous levels, has now expired. What's your reaction to that?
It's not really surprising. For a start, Putin doesn't really want this because obviously nuclear weapons are a key aspect of his power. On the other hand, President Trump also doesn't like this because he basically doesn't see a need. America can build far better nuclear weapons than Russia. So neither side is interested in this treaty. And it means that, yes, there may well be an arms race in nuclear weapons.
Well, as you said, the US and Russia have not initiated discussions to negotiate something to replace New START, and President Trump has declined to even respond to a Russian proposal to continue to respect the central limits of the treaty for another year. I mean, that's pretty unfortunate, isn't it?
Well, from President Trump's point of view, the treaty was perhaps not the best because he can outbuild the Russians and this technology is better. The American technology is better. So he's certainly not going to be interested. There is another aspect to all this, is that by deliberately limiting themselves, Russia and America, they allow other nations, and I'm thinking of China, and probably President Donald Trump is too, to catch them up relatively quickly. And so therefore, he was not interested. And I don't even believe that the Russian proposal was much more than a PR stunt, to be honest.
Well, you raised an important question about China, and I'm going to come to that hopefully before we end this chat. Russia, though, in reaction to that lack of response from the US, has said that it is no longer bound by the limits on the number of nuclear warheads it can deploy. I mean, how worrying is this rhetoric for you? Because I'm reminded of two of your books, Russia, World War III and Stopping World War III, in which you suggest that there could be a nuclear war if the arms buildup continues.
You're quite right. The central problem is precisely this. The lack of this treaty actually has more than the obvious effect of, as Putin has said, now no longer being bound by it. It implies both sides are no longer interested in such limitations. They can now concentrate on possibly fighting a nuclear war. In other words, it removes an inhibition. And this is very important. We are moving towards World War III by the very fact of this treaty no longer being in existence and no longer even being wanted. It signals quite clearly that both sides are prepared not to build more nuclear arms and, if needs be, to use them.
And is it likely that within the next year or so, I mean, we're going to see a push from hardliners in America and in the Trump administration who want to increase the size of the US arsenal as a means of trying to deter China, which is now increasing its smaller but still deadly nuclear arsenal?
Yes, I do anticipate that America will, in fact, enter into a new arms race and arms build-up on its side, just as I anticipate that Russia may well now be contemplating using its tactical nuclear missiles in order to break through, for example, the front on Poland, should it open one, which is what I expect. And therefore, yes, there will be now extra nuclear missiles constructed, certainly by America and also by China, because China, seeing there's no limit, will also, by the same token, see that it can build more, and moreover will feel it has to do that because it'll be worried that it could be taken out by a first strike. That is to say, the first strike is sufficient to so cripple China that she'll be unable to fight on should tensions rise. And obviously, tensions are quite high because of the war in Ukraine and also over Taiwan.
Now, President Trump has talked about including China, as you mentioned, in what could be the next nuclear arms control deal. He's previously said that he believes that they can do a better agreement than the New START. I mean, what's your reading of all that? Because Mr. Trump talks a lot about his interest in denuclearization with Russia and China, but 5 years into his presidency, I mean, his first and second terms, he's achieved absolutely nothing in that regard.
I don't actually see that his words are anything more than window dressing. Unfortunately, it looks good to the world that he's obviously a statesman, a man of peace. But as you put it quite accurately, this is simply not happening. There's no reduction. Moreover, it has to be remembered that the dream of organizations like C&D for a nuclear-free world is just a dream, because all it means is whoever can nuke up first wins. And this is the situation now facing everyone. China has far fewer nukes than America. So it's very hard to see how China could be included easily in such an agreement, since it would insist on having nuclear parity with America and Russia. And this is obviously the very thing that America, presumably, does not want. So even if President Donald Trump was serious, there remains difficulties, grave difficulties to achieving such a treaty.
Well, stay with us, Dr. Laskiewicz, because I'd like to get your assessment of this next story. 2 days of talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States aimed at ending Moscow's war on its neighbor have ended with the exchange of more prisoners of war. 314 captured soldiers, half from each side, have been swapped, the first such exchange in 4 months. But there's no hint of any breakthrough on the big issue at the heart of any peace deal, which is control over land in the eastern Donbass region, where fighting remains intense. Russia demands that Ukraine hand over the rest of the region that it hasn't conquered, but Kyiv is only agreeing to freezing the fighting at the current front line. Even then, it also wants firm guarantees from its allies that they would enforce any ceasefire. But Russia has made it clear it won't accept any arrangement that brings NATO troops into Ukraine. And the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, is still with me on the line from London. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And all the delegates attending those Russia-Ukraine peace talks have talked about progress and concrete steps. But beyond that, is there any positive news from those talks in the UAE beyond the prisoner swap? Or is it a bit like reading the tea leaves?
I'm afraid it's not even a question of tea leaves, because the cup is empty. There never is and never was much possibility of the two sides agreeing. What they have done, and this is because of President Donald Trump, to his credit, they've been brought together to talk. And again, because his presence looms over this conference, they've done the minimum possible to show President Donald Trump that, in inverted commas, serious about peace. Well, because this President of War exchange happened before and actually makes no impact whatsoever and is of no real consequence. What has therefore happened is nothing. What that means is The fighting goes on. There's no end in sight. Neither side has shown the slightest inclination to compromise. Both terms, the Russian for Ukrainians and Ukrainians for Russia, are utterly unacceptable by the other side. And this is where we were, if you like, now for months, or indeed, actually now years.
So basically, these talks are horrendously, almost impossibly difficult, despite the relatively positive sounds coming from the envoys. And of course, ahead of the second day of talks, massive Russian attacks have been continuing in Ukraine. 183 drones and some missiles too, according to the Ukrainians. So the war continues to be deadly.
Oh yes, the very fact that Russia continues now droning and missiling Ukraine shows that there is no peace here. And as for the positive signs, all that is just PR, it's just window dressing, that's all. It means nothing. Russia is determined to carry on. It sees victory in its sights. As far as it can see, just press and press, and in the end, Ukraine will crack. Ukraine, for its side, sees no reason for cracking because the Russians cannot make, or have not made a significant, really, breakthrough, and therefore the war will continue, and indeed is continuing during these talks. There is not even a possibility of a ceasefire, nothing. So therefore, I'm afraid it's a lot of hogwash which is being stated by both sides, that there's some, open inverted commas, concrete and pleasant talks.
On that note, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the author and international affairs analyst who's talking to me on the line from London.